Hello and welcome to Business 360. I'm Shireen Bhan. The headlines that we're tracking for you this evening: it's Judgment Day in the tariff war. US President Donald Trump is all set to unveil a plan to impose tariffs on key trading partners, which is likely to include India. Investors tread with caution across the world. Special live coverage from Washington and Wall Street starts at 11 p.m. right here tonight. India has made a far-reaching offer to the US to reduce tariffs. Government sources say talks were held on sensitive issues like agri-tariffs and quality control orders. New Delhi is hoping for a temporary reprieve, even as authorities prepare to deal with all scenarios. India's crude oil imports from the US in March rise 67% amidst tariff threats from President Trump. LNG imports from the US also hit a record high in FY25. India has already cut tariffs on motorcycles and bourbon whiskey, among other goods. Bulls regained some lost ground after yesterday's sell-off. The Sensex and the Nifty gain 1%. Mid-caps outperform. Real estate and consumer stocks lead the rebound. India's 10-year sovereign bond rally after RBI's 80,000 crore rupee purchase plan. Yields dropped below 6.5%, the lowest level seen in the last 3 years. More than 43% of the companies that went public in FY25 are trading below the IPO price. Most of the gains were wiped out in the second half of the fiscal, souring sentiment in the primary markets. The government tables the Waqf amendment bill in the Lok Sabha. The new bill, among others, proposes that land cannot be considered as Waqf property simply because it has been used as such over time. Union Minister Rijiju says the bill does not intend to interfere in any religious practice or the management of any mosque. The Congress argues that the bill is a bid to defame and disenfranchise minorities. The Indian Army says Pakistani troops intruded across the line of control and indulged in ceasefire violation. Adds the Indian soldiers responded effectively. Indian forces are still engaged in a lengthy operation against suspected militants in Kathuar district for the last 11 days. Israel expands its ground offensive in Gaza, announces a plan to seize large areas amidst fears of a famine in the war-torn region. The Forbes rich list shows a record 3,087 billionaires own a net worth of more than $16 trillion. This is more than the GDP of all countries, barring the US and China. Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg and Jeff Bezos top the global list. Mukesh Ambani tops the list in India, followed by Gautam Adani. Well, let's start with the market action. Bulls did regain some lost ground after yesterday's massive sell-off. The Nifty and the Sensex gaining nearly 1%, with heavyweights like HDFC, ICICI Bank and Infosys leading from the front. 160 point higher, that's the Nifty for you. 592 points higher for the Sensex. The Nifty Bank also 1% higher. Similar story playing out for the Nifty mid-cap, 1.5% higher today. So the broader market's also participating there. Prashant is standing by with the day's trading action. Prashant, after yesterday's sell-off, the markets are rebounding today, but of course nervous ahead of the big Liberation Day announcements.
Well, yesterday the Nifty got smashed. Today we recovered about half of those gains. How much should you read into these moves as we head into the tariffs tonight? I think that is questionable. A lot of it perhaps positioning. I'm not sure any of it is based on conviction one way or the other. The tariffs are going to be, lower, more dovish, or they're going to be more hawkish. This is just sort of, changing what you already own, less lightening of positions, adding on a little bit here and there. I think that's what's essentially been going on for the last couple of days now. Now, the Nifty is up on your screen. As I said, about 50% of yesterday's losses recouped. Nifty Bank did even better, about a 1% pop coming in the Nifty Bank. And mid and small cap indices were up about 1.5% apiece. So here, of course, there was broad-based buying, which we saw. Although volumes were kind of mixed. There was enough stuff which was down on volumes once again, like what we saw yesterday. Now, as far as the Nifty is concerned, before I get to the broader market, consumer names did quite well. So Tata Consumer, Titan, Trent, Zomato, a lot of Tata there, top of the sort of gainers list. IndusInd Bank did well, Tech Mahindra. Maruti was another one which actually participated on the upside. On the downside, you had Bharat Electronics, Ultratech and Nestle, which came under some selling pressure. Broader markets, I'll start with what was up. Kalyan Jewellers, big volume-led gainer. DB Realty, Shyam Metallics. There was a name like PNB Housing, Style Bazaar, KPR Mills, Supriya Life, Galaxy Surfactants. This is, the bulk of what was up on strong volumes in that sense. On the downside, as I said, a fair bit as well. BEL, there was Bajaj Holdings, Vari Energy, there was a Bernstein note, skeptical on the space. Central Bank, RBL Bank, UCO Bank. Then there's a banking space which saw some selling. Fortis, just profit booking after the last 2-3 days of run-up. KEC, Mahindra and Mahindra Finance, Novama was down about 2%. And there was like a BKG which was lower as well. So just sort of, market action for you. The big one, of course, is what we will learn from the US session when President Trump and his team announced the reciprocal tariffs. And I think we'll just have to take it as it comes tomorrow when we return. Back to you.
Thanks very much, Prashant. And yes, we will, of course, be tracking all the action overnight. Plenty expected there from the US. Indian bonds, meanwhile, yields have fallen by nearly 10 basis points. This after the RBI announced late last evening that it will buy 80,000 crores of bonds in April alone. Latha standing by with more. Latha.
Yes, a 10 basis point fall is rather unusual. So the benchmark 10-year now, the new 10-year has fallen from 6.58 to about 6.49. So basically 9 basis points at least of fall. And that is, as you said, because of this quite unexpected 80,000 crore bond calendar. Very rarely does the Reserve Bank say that I'm going to do one every week. And it's, 4 bond auctions of 20,000 crore each. It indicates a determination of the part of the RBI to keep liquidity plentiful. Actually, we ended the financial year FY25 as well with a decent surplus in the interbank borrowing market. What you call core liquidity was positive surplus by about 1.5 lakh crore. And the Reserve Bank coming proactively and saying we will be doing every week indicates that they probably want to keep the liquidity at a 2 lakh crore surplus. The market is reading this as extremely dovish because that means they will be dovish in the monetary policy coming up on Wednesday next, April 9th. A rate cut was always factored in by the market, but now the market's reading more. Will they also go in for a stance change? The stance currently is neutral. Will they go in for something like, a more accommodative stance? Will the language change? And therefore, you are seeing a fairly outsized reaction in the bond market. But now the 25 basis point rate cut expected on April 9th is completely priced in. And then, of course, there are other small positives as well. The US bond yields have also fallen, and there is rising talk, including from Goldman Sachs, about a possible recession. So all that is also abetting the rally in the Indian bond market.
Latha, many thanks. And the big story this evening, it is Judgment Day in the tariff war. US President Donald Trump all set to unveil a plan to impose tariffs on key trading partners, which could include India. The tariffs are likely to come into effect immediately. However, neither Trump or his administration has revealed any details regarding the structure of the duties or the countries that will be impacted. US officials have made it clear that top trading partners with whom the US has a large trade deficit will be the target of the tariffs. The US runs a trade deficit of $41 billion with India, which ranks 11th in a list topped by China, Mexico and Vietnam. So what can India expect? Our colleague Sanjay Suri reports from Washington on the proposed tariffs. Sanjay.
Finally, it's T day. T for tariffs, we all know, but what tariffs on who? Nobody knows. Presumably, one would think the White House knows, but not everyone's sure of that either. President Trump has no doubt said that it's all settled, but several reports continue to suggest a lack of unanimity even within the Trump cabinet on exactly what model of tariffs should be applied, on whom, who should be spared. Divisions are reported to have surfaced quite sharply at a closed-door meeting at the White House here on the proposed tariffs, and this was a meeting held on Tuesday, just the day before the big announcement on Liberation Day, April the 2nd. The broad debate has been on whether reciprocal tariffs should sit alongside some form of universal tariff. Trump had, of course, suggested a universal tariff earlier on in his campaign to bring in tariffs, and he's faced some push to revive that model. The more recent, the more current approach has been for measured and negotiated reciprocal tariffs. And India and the US have been negotiating on those terms and on that basis. Trump has said, in line with all that, over the past couple of days, that he would prefer a deal to taking steps that he warned would not be pretty. And he has noted that India has agreed to drop tariffs. But we are all aware, of course, that there can be a difference between what Trump says and what he does. And so a worried world waits nervously. not very long to wait now. Americans are no less nervous, no less worried, and the US has been in this sort of place before, so they have reason to worry. And that was close to a century back when the US raised tariffs under an act in 1930 drafted by Senator Smoot and Representative Hawley. And under that law that they brought in, tariffs were raised, and this provoked counter tariffs and set off the Great Depression. The Trump team is confident it will be different now, but already the Federal Reserve has cut growth estimates down straight away from 2.1% to 1.7%. A recession is expected. Trump himself has not ruled it out. The US is not exactly celebrating. The markets are down. They may not stay down if Trump can begin to deliver as promised, and no one really can say at the moment how big an if that is.
Sanjay Suri, yes, nervousness around the world at this point in time. That is the view from Washington. But back home, India has made a far-reaching offer to the US to reduce tariffs. Delhi is hoping for a temporary reprieve, even as authorities prepare to deal with all scenarios. Abhimanyu joins us now with the slew of tariff concessions that India has already made for the US. Abhimanyu, a lot of measures have already been undertaken since January, ostensibly to try and stave off the threat of tariffs. What are you hearing now on what next, but also recap for our viewers what has already happened so far?
Several concessions have already been announced by India for the US ever since Donald Trump took over as American president. Now, the basic customs duty on motorbikes has been cut from 50% to 40% and 30% respectively on completely built up units with engine capacities of up to 1,600cc and 1,600cc or more. The BCD on motorbikes has also been cut in the union budget before PM Modi visited the US to meet Donald Trump. India also removed 6% equalization levy on online ads, which is going to benefit American software giants Google and Meta, and may also lead to a loss in revenue for the Indian government. India has slashed the overall effective import duties from 100% to 50% on bourbon whiskey, from 20% to 10% on carrier-grade Ethernet switches, and from 100% to 20% on synthetic flavoring essences. The BCD has been cut from 15% to 5% on the fish hydrolytes for use in manufacture of fish feed. India's LNG imports from the US have also risen to an all-time high. India is also intending to increase its overall energy imports from the US to reduce the trade imbalance. India and US are already in talks for a bilateral trade agreement, as both the countries intend to increase their trade to $500 billion over the next 5 years. It remains to be seen what is going to be the announcement on reciprocal tariffs by the United States and the subsequent action which is going to be taken by the Indian government.
Abhimanyu, many thanks. Now, India's crude oil imports in March from the US have risen by 67% compared to February. This as President Trump continues his efforts to boost American oil exports. However, India's purchases from Russia have also risen by 11%. In fact, speaking to me in January, Petroleum Minister Hardeep Singh Puri had hinted that India will strengthen its trade ties with the US when it comes to energy. Take a look.
Energy cooperation, President Trump saying that India should buy more LNG, more energy from the US. He's even put out a number there saying that should increase from $15 billion to $25 billion. I wanted to get your comments on that. We have spoken about this previously as well. Do you believe it makes sense? It is something that we should actively pursue and build on.
Energy cooperation between the United States and India was widely expected to figure in the bilateral talks. If you read the joint statement, if you read what the President said, what the Prime Minister said, that's evidence. And I think there is already fairly substantial energy cooperation. The fact of the matter is India needs more energy. We have long-term deals on gas with one country which was there till 2028. You've signed another 20 years there. We are in the market for more gas. We have a stated policy of taking it from 6% to 15% in the energy mix. And I think we have a very substantive relationship with the United States, mostly on gas. I see definitely those quantities being addressed for increase.
Well, that is the oil minister, Hardeep Singh Puri. Now, it's been just over 2 months since President Trump arrived in the White House. His rhetoric on tariffs have shaken global markets, causing uncertainty for businesses worldwide. Here's a look back at the 72 days that have shaken the global economy. Take a look.
We're thinking in terms of 25% on Mexico and Canada because they're allowing vast numbers of people. Canada's a very bad abuser also. Vast numbers of people to come in and fentanyl to come in.
When do you think you would enact those?
I think February 1st.
Trump asked me how long I wanted to pause tariffs. I told him a month. I'm sure we'll be able to deliver good results for his people and the people of Mexico in that month.
So today, the United States launched a trade war against Canada, their closest partner and ally, their closest friend. Now, it's not in my habit to agree with the Wall Street Journal, but Donald, they point out that even though you're a very smart guy, this is a very dumb thing to do.
We're talking about a tariff of 10% on China based on the fact that they're sending fentanyl to Mexico and Canada.
There are no winners in trade wars or tariff wars. Raising tariffs will only impose greater losses on American businesses and consumers.
The European Union is very, very bad to us. They treat us very, very badly. They don't take our cars. They don't take our cars at all. They don't take our farm products, essentially. They don't take very much. We have a $350 billion deficit with the European Union. They treat us very, very badly. So they're going to be in for tariffs.
As the United States are applying tariffs worth $28 billion, we are responding with countermeasures worth 26 billion euros. This matches the economic scope of the tariffs of the United States.
The country will be reciprocal. That's right. Everybody. It won't affect everybody because there's some where we have similar tariffs. But the ones that are taking advantage of the United States, we're going to have it's reciprocity, it's reciprocal.
You mentioned auto tariffs the other day.
Yeah.
When do you plan to unroll?
Howard, I'd say over the next sometime, or maybe around April 2nd. I would have done them on April 1st. Believe it or not, I'm a little superstitious. No, literally, we had it planned for April 1st. I said, let's make it April 2nd. We're going to end up with a very good relationship with Canada and a lot of the other countries. Some we probably won't. It won't be so pleasant. But I think most countries are agreeing with me. They actually, many of them have actually apologized. They said, look, we have taken advantage.
Well, that's 72 days of Donald Trump in the White House. Our special coverage of the Trump tariff announcement starts at 11 p.m. right here on CNBC-TV18. President Trump is expected to speak at 1:30 a.m. India time, so it promises to be a long night. Join us as we bring you all the action live from Washington and Wall Street. Get the CNBC edge. And on to the action from the commodity space. Oil prices ease after falling in yesterday's session ahead of Trump's tariff measures. The new tariffs could deepen a global trade war that could limit crude demand. Meanwhile, gold prices trading off record highs, but prices still holding above $3,100 an ounce. Trump's tariff measures, weak U.S. jobs data and manufacturing data spurred gold buying. Remember, gold has soared over 18% just between January and March, clocking its best quarter since 1986. India's factory output rising to an 8-month high in March, according to data released by HSBC and compiled by S&P Global Manufacturing PMI, rose to 58.1 in March versus 56.3 in February. This was largely driven by stronger order growth, increased customer interest and favorable demand conditions. Remember, a reading above 50 denotes expansion, while a reading below 50 denotes contraction. The Reserve Bank of India has appointed Poonam Gupta as the new Deputy Governor for 3 years. Gupta is currently the Director General of the National Council of Applied Economic Research. She's also a member of the Economic Advisory Council to the Prime Minister. Gupta will replace former RBI Deputy Governor Michael Patra, who retired on the 14th of January. Her appointment comes just 5 days before the next monetary policy meeting, which kicks off on Monday. So that vacancy now being filled. Poonam Gupta is the new RBI DG. The government has collected dividends worth 74,000 crore rupees from public sector units in FY25. That's the highest number that the government has received so far. The dividend mop-up was 16% from a year before and almost 35% higher than the revised estimate for FY25. Coal India and ONGC are the top dividend payers, worth over 10,000 crore rupees each, followed by Indian Oil, Power Grid and NTPC. The total number of pending cases against SEBI orders at the Securities Appellate Tribunal surging over 50% in 2024. According to the Finance Ministry, cases pending for adjudication have grown to 1,121 cases in the previous year versus 736 cases in 23. FY25 has witnessed 78 companies listing on the bourses, collectively raising over 1.6 lakh crore rupees. However, out of this, nearly half of the listings have ended the fiscal year below their issue price. Hormuz joins us now with the details. Hormuz, take us through the year that eventually was, as far as IPOs were concerned. We had a great start, but of course a tepid close. And more importantly, what this now means for the future IPO pipeline.
Well, looking at the market sell-off of the last 3 months, it almost feels like people have forgotten about the existence of IPOs, but there were lots of them in FY25, particularly in the first 9 months. And summarizing that data from Prime Database, around about 78 companies went public in FY25, and out of them, nearly half, or almost 34 of them, ended below their issue price at the close of the financial year. That's what the Prime Database data is indicating. Now, there were 10 such companies that listed below their IPO price and stayed below them. There were 24 such companies which opened above their IPO price but ended up giving up most of those gains. And there were also 10 companies that saw a sharp surge in the initial phase but then are now down only to single-digit gains when compared to their IPO price. And there were plenty of underperformers when it comes to these IPOs. Godavari Biorefineries is leading that chart, 60% below its IPO price at the end of FY25. Kararo India, Western Carriers, Saraswati Sari not far behind, with shares falling anywhere between 50% to 55% from their IPO price. Of course, that does not mean that there were no outperformers for the financial year. There were plenty of them, and there were some of the names like KRN Heat, which has surged almost 4x from its IPO price in just 1 year of listing. And Bharti Hexacom is another one, 153% surge despite a significant correction from the top that the stock has seen. So another outperformer there. And Quadrant Future Tech, another recent listing, almost double from its IPO price. Now, some of the IPOs might be returning anytime soon, but the market volatility is keeping a lid on these future IPOs. And of course, another factor is that the shareholder lock-ins are coming to the end of these already listed companies, so expect some more action in these names as well.
Many thanks for joining us, Hormuz. Reliance has entered the esports business after its subsidiary Rise World announced that it will start a joint venture with Blast Esports. Rise plans to host large-scale gaming events on the GeoGames platform. Through this partnership, the JV will also help bring the European esports entertainment companies' events to India. We will head to a break, but up next, the government tables the Waqf Amendment Bill in the Lok Sabha. That and more when we return. The government tabled the Waqf Amendment Bill in the Lok Sabha today. The new bill, among others, proposes that land cannot be considered as Waqf property simply because it has been used as such over time. Union Minister Rijiju opened the debate in the lower house. He said that the bill does not intend to interfere in any religious practice or the management of any mosque. The Congress argued that the bill is a bid to defame and disenfranchise minorities.
मुसलमानों में भी जो शियास हैं, सुन्नीस हैं, बोरास, आकाकानीस, पसमानदा मुस्लिम्स हैं जिसको बैकवर्ड माना जाता है, और विशेष करके महिलाएं और बच्चों के लिए जो हमने प्रावधान रखा है, तो ये मुसलमान का कम्युनिटी के अंदर में इतना जोरदार स्वागत हो रहा है, इसका ऑडिट प्रॉपर होना चाहिए। तो ऑडिट का भी प्रावधान हम लोग राज्य सरकार को ऊपर में छोड़ा है, क्योंकि आखिर तो सर ये सारा प्रॉपर्टी का अथॉरिटी राज्य सरकार का है।
इस बिल के द्वारा 4 इनके मूल उद्देश्य। पहला मूल उद्देश्य है कि संविधान को कमजोर करना, टू डाइल्यूट द कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन। इनका दूसरा उद्देश्य है भ्रम फैलाना, टू डिफेम द माइनॉरिटी कम्युनिटीज ऑफ इंडिया। इनका तीसरा उद्देश्य है टू डिवाइड द इंडियन सोसाइटी। चौथा इनका उद्देश्य है टू डिसएनफ्रेंचाइज द माइनॉरिटी कम्युनिटीज।
Ashmit Kumar joins us now to take us through the contours of the Waqf Amendment Bill. Ashmit, take our viewers through what the government is proposing, what the implications and the impact will be if the bill goes through.
Well, we just heard the heated debate in the parliament, and well, underlying that debate are a lot of key changes that have been proposed as a part of this latest 2025 bill. One of the key changes is that the overarching council that sits atop these various Waqf boards, now there is a provision that has been introduced that the 3 MPs that are a part of this governing council, as such, this overarching council, they need not necessarily be Muslim. Further, there's another caveat that at least 2 members of this entire governing council need to be non-Muslim. That is, in fact, one of the key changes. The other key change is that decisions that were taken by the board as well as by the Waqf tribunals had an element of finality. What this bill does is that it adds another layer of appeal. What it does is that these decisions now that have been taken by the tribunal, which had an element of finality, now can also be challenged before the local high courts. Further, and this is an important decision, the government has said as a part of this bill that no government property can be qualified, can be designated as a Waqf property, and this will apply not just prospectively, but also retrospectively, which in fact has been a key concern voiced by various members of the opposition parties and various scholars as well. Also, another key change that has been made is that no practicing Muslim can make this Waqf donation unless he or she has been practicing Islam for 5 years or more. That threshold has been put to 5. In fact, there were comments that we heard in the parliament. Why restrict it? Why place the threshold as high as 5? Why restrict it to only practicing Muslims? These are questions that are being raised in the parliament as we speak. Also, another key change that has been made is that Section 40, which granted Waqf boards the powers to decide on the status of a property, on whether or not it is a Waqf property, that power of the Waqf board has been stripped entirely, has been taken away as a part of this new bill. So clearly, a lot of key changes here, awaiting a vote from the parliament.
Yes, we will, of course, be tracking the developments in Parliament. Ashwin, many thanks for joining us. Before we wrap, Forbes has released its annual list of billionaires. There are a record 3,087 billionaires around the world with a combined net worth of over $16 trillion. This is more than the annual GDP of all nations barring the US and China. The US is home to a record 902 billionaires, followed by China with 516. India is ranked number 3 with 205 billionaires. The richest man in the world is Elon Musk with a net worth of $342 billion, followed by Mark Zuckerberg with $216 billion and Jeff Bezos with a net worth of $215 billion. US President Donald Trump's fortunes have doubled in the last 1 year thanks to his social media platform Truth Social and his cryptocurrency bets. Mukesh Ambani tops the list in India, is ranked number 18 in the world. He's followed by Gautam Adani and Savitri Jindal. And finally, only 13% of the billionaires in the world are women. The list has more than 2,600 men and 406 women. Well, with that, it is time for us to wrap up this edition of Business 360. The news will continue right here on CNBC-TV18. Stay tuned. We're back in a minute with more.